My name is Gary. I want to welcome you to another episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. I have Heather, my co-host, with me today. Heather, how are you doing?
It's been a good morning so far.
Yes, it has. It's been busy and informative, right? One thing that I'm interested a little bit about in this next guest that we have is just changes in the education system.
Right.
It seems
we know
like
there's been a lot of them.
Yeah, it just seems like kids are handled differently today. Certainly curriculums and a lot of other things have changed. And wondering, there's a lot with just diversity and all kinds of things that go on that are different than it was back when we went to school years and years ago. Mm-hmm. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I grew up with Oregon Trail. That was my first introduction to computers in the school system. And I know it's come a long way since then. So I'm interested on his take on COVID and how that kind of impacted things. And
it's interesting you say that, because I went to a little country school and I didn't know what a computer was.
Right.
But I only went to the 8th grade. So I learned that later in life, and I had to learn how to type. So I've got the old eagle view. Yep. We just do it that way. Without any further ado, we want to bring in our guest, Brad Bakle. Brad Bakle is worked in the education system his entire career. And we are looking forward to a conversation with you, Brad, learning a lot about it, maybe even some things that parents can be aware of that could be beneficial to their child's education. Things that you could encourage them with. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Brad.
Well, Gary and Heather, thanks for having me. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, born in Columbus, Ohio, but grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Went to school all the years through. Had two sisters. My dad was a teacher, and my mom stayed at home. So we were not, really well off, but boy, oh boy, both my parents sure pushed education on us. And so that was, I thought that was valuable. I don't know if I thought it at the time, but I finally realized it. Went to school in Indiana. I went to IU and then Indiana State. Done a lot of schooling throughout all the years. And I have been teacher and a principal and an assistant superintendent for 43 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've got some good, one Big Ten school in there. So Indiana seems to have some pretty good colleges.
Purdue's doing great.
Yeah, they are. They're having a good run right now.
I was referencing back to that instead of,
with that, you grew up with your parents in education or your dad's in education. That kind of influenced you to go that way, or were there some other considerations early on?
Yes. Interesting thing, when I graduated from high school, my mom graduated finally from college, and she went into education as well. She's an English teacher. My dad's influence on me with education was, I'll kill you if you ever go into education. He was, he tried everything to talk me. And I was younger, so it wasn't like I even thought about any of that at the time. I wanted to be a baseball player or something. But he wanted me to be an accountant, and he said, I don't want you going into education at all. And I think that was the motivation for me to go into education.
Right. It often is. It seems like it's interesting when we interview people. A lot of times they either want their kids to do what they're doing or they don't at all.
Yeah.
And with my kids, my biggest push was go do whatever it is you want to do. I mean, if you can dream it, you can imagine it, just go do it. And you'll be successful and enjoy your, what you're doing. And if you try a few things, it's okay. So
that's interesting that he wanted to push you away from it, even though he was in it, and your mother ended up going into education
right. Yeah,
as well.
Dad was in it his whole life, along with a few jobs at a time. Quite often, he did bookkeeping, accounting work for a firm as well on a side job. But the real thing that changed me. We have a youth baseball group here in Fort Wayne. It's called Wildcat Baseball.
Mhm.
And I was a coach, and working with the little kids started about 7 years old until they're 15. And I got hooked. I liked kids. I liked, just seeing how they were and the changes that he made over a summer. And it was wonderful.
So if he didn't want you to go into education, and he clearly was, you had mentioned doing some accounting and things like that, did he just feel like it was a better financial path for you, or was it because things were changing what he felt? Because it's interesting to watch generations, and they're like, well, it isn't, the school system's not what it once was, or it can be anything, construction or whatever, but what drove that?
Yeah, I really think it was the financial part of it. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. As he loved education for himself, he just didn't want the headaches that went with it, in his view, and the time spent being a teacher,
right?
Because that's one of those topics where nobody really knows how much time a teacher spends,
right?
Other than just in the classroom. But yeah, I think he was looking at the financial end of it for me.
Okay. Well, I always look at teachers like that's so nice for them to have the summer off, other than it seems a lot of them pick up some coaching and other things they do to supplement that.
Right.
But I do know during a school year, there can be a lot of hours, especially if there's, parent-teacher meetings and in-services and things like that. I would imagine, though, from the era of your father to the time you went into retirement, though, that pay scales and some of that structure started to change in that period of time.
It did. I can tell you, for me personally, I started out in my first year of teaching, I was making less than $10,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And, by the time I ended it, it changed drastically.
But you'd also continued your education so you
Right.
could advance positions
Yes,
and
that's true.
do other things.
So let's go backwards here.
Okay.
One question we like to ask all of our guests: do you have a morning routine?
Gosh, I have a morning routine now. I like my morning routine when I was working much better. I would get up 6:15 in the morning, hustle, take that shower, brush the teeth, shave, and get right into work. It was almost an obsession for me. How quickly can I get from waking up into the job? And part of that was, it was necessary, because when the staff would start coming into the building, my time's gone. There are needs, there are conversations that they may want to have. They may just want to visit, but quite often it's, just talking, working things out advice-wise. Now, I'm not a great sleeper, so I quite often wake up on my own at about 4:30 in the morning. Get out of bed, watch a little YouTube from the day before, and then get on an elliptical. Or right now, that because the weather's so cold. But yeah, we'll walk. Try to walk in the morning.
Okay.
Excellent. Keep some exercise going.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to ask you a couple of what we call rapid fire questions. These are 3 questions you did not see, and it's just to kind of catch you off guard a little bit and get some random answers. These are always fun for everyone. What is one childish thing you still enjoy?
One childish thing. Let me think about this a sec. I still enjoy, I collect baseball cards.
Okay.
Excellent.
I guess that's kind of a childish thing, right?
I wish I'd have kept
Childhood.
mine.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
At some point I sold all mine. Just felt like I was catching the peak of the market, and I had other things I wanted to spend money on.
So how many would you say you have?
Oh, wow. 10,000 maybe. I have,
wow.
Yeah.
I have boxes that have the kind of the pristine type And then I have sacks that just have a bunch of a bunch of them just thrown in it. So, but
Right.
bag upon bag, those canvas types of bags that you find every once in a while. And,
Yeah. So you got any Mickey Mantle
I have a
cards?
Mickey Mantle rookie card.
Do you really?
I
Do you have
really
any idea
like the guys too.
Do you have the idea of what the value is on that card?
An attorney buddy of mine told me that it was well high in the six figures.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
That's what I was expecting. What about some others? I'm thinking some Lou Brock cards turned into being pretty good, but there was a couple others out there.
Hank Aaron cards are popular.
Yes. Yeah.
Johnny Bench cards are still around and doing well. I had back in the day, this was back in the 60s, they would do these kind of stars for the baseball teams. There was an Al Kaline, Norm Cash one that I cherished greatly. I was a Detroit Tigers fan growing up.
Yep.
Roberto Clemente and who was it? Willie Stargell. Is that right? No. God, I need to put it together. Willie Mays and I've lost. I can't read. See, I haven't looked at those in a while. You can tell.
Yeah, you're gonna go get into them after we get off of this.
Yeah.
There you go. You can spend part of your retirement organizing them.
Sell a few baseball cards. You can buy a Maserati or something.
Probably could. Or pass them down to my kids. I don't know.
There you go.
What time of day are you most productive?
I'm most productive in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say about 1 o'clock, I'm drifting off and doing other things. So that, 8 to 1, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you the hardest on yourself for?
I would have to say staying active.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right now, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I've been pretty tough on myself in the past about, keeping organized. It's one of those things where I was so meticulous growing up,
Right.
and all of a sudden I hit a wall, and it was procrastinating. That's
Right.
what I'm really the worst at is I like to procrastinate. I think Heather's actually kind of dealt with that in our emails back and forth.
That's okay. I hope I was patient enough for you.
Sometimes though it's easy to procrastinate when you don't have a busy schedule. Yeah. I know that's for myself. I know I've got things happening and at the top of the hour, something else is going to happen. And so I've got to quick respond to a few emails and do things. And then when you have all day to do it, pretty soon it's 3 o'clock and it's like, I'm going to do that in the morning.
Yep.
So that's a big difference. And I know you've transitioned into retirement, but I'll let you go ask the next one, Heather, and kind of start moving down that path.
So we talked about it a little bit earlier. You touched on, your father trying to wean you away from it and you enjoyed the coaching. But when did you decide that education was the path that you wanted to take and you'd had a passion for it?
I was a sophomore in college. I was taking physics classes, some things like that. My goal was to be a dentist. And something clicked in me and I thought, do I really? I had a buddy that was doing the same thing at IU, and he was a year ahead of me, and he's telling me about all of the hands in the mouths and those kind of things. And I started thinking, okay, I'm too germophobic to follow through with this. But what really did it was I continued to have experiences working with kids, and I had lost that. So I had that opportunity still, and I realized that that's what I liked. I did what I liked.
Right. And that's, looking back, it worked out, I'm sure, well for you. It's life has its interesting way of taking its course, and Long-standing career. You were a teacher, but then you transitioned into being a principal. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how many years were you a teacher, and did you coach while you were teaching, or how did that all develop?
I was a teacher for 16 years. I
Okay.
taught elementary education. Primarily I taught third and fourth grade.
Okay.
I had 1 year as a first grade teacher, and that was
Okay.
that's a tough job. That in kindergarten, boy, oh boy. Um, so 16 years in that. And during part of that time, I thought, I need to just get some more experiences, education, and I decided to take classes for administration, and did it over a couple years, and realized that, well, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to take all these classes, maybe I should start interviewing. So after about 16 years of teaching, I ended up becoming a principal in one of the local school districts. And there's a joke that used to go around. I'd probably tell it more than anyone else did now, but any building the Bakle was in was going to shut down pretty soon.
Oh no.
Yeah, my first building that I was in has been torn down. The second building I was in has been sold to the Catholic diocese. The third building I was in has been abandoned. Fourth building I've been in was torn down, but my last building's still up and thriving. So that was
As of right now.
yeah, yes, right. It's pretty new school, so yeah. So that was kind of the joke about that.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up. I can only imagine that happened because school districts and things have changed tremendously in your career. I mean, you did it for what, 40 years?
Yeah, close to 43.
43. So from the beginning, I'm doubtful you worked in one room community schools. That was probably before your time, but you've still seen a lot of smaller districts and probably seen some redistricting. Was that the case, or did that not really happen?
It was definitely the case. Part of the reason for those buildings being torn down had to do with some redistricting within the district itself. And also how the population flow would change. The northern part of this school district is thriving. It's just constantly growing, and the southern part has remained, I don't know, stale. It just has not, and it's housing. Those types of things tend to dictate what part of the school district's going to have the populations.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, so with seeing some of that stuff happen, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but seeing some of those things happen with, generationally over the years, one question that I thought of immediately when I knew you were going to be on here, what was the difference working with parents and kids at the beginning of your career compared to the end of your career? And I asked this question because I'd also like you to follow up with a recommendation of what it looks like to be maybe that parent that is easy to work with, to give people listening to this an idea that, oh, this is what the teachers and the school district like to see, and this is how we communicate most effectively so the child has the best opportunity.
Yeah, I would say because there were changes in the school attendance areas. Believe it or not, some people wouldn't experience this, but I think that the parent involvement has really grown over the 28 years that I was in administration. And I find that communication has changed, obviously, with so much easy access now to communicate what we're doing on, cell phones, no landlines anymore. And just, I'd have to say that that's probably been a big reason for the differences. Parents, depending on where I was, were uninvolved or overly so. And that depended, again, I would have to say, on the home life for those people. Some of them had a little bit more freedom than others did. I had a lot of parents early on in the school I was in who, they worked 3 jobs just to make it.
Right.
And so they didn't have the time to really get deeply involved with the kids. But I would have to say now we have so much in the way of volunteers, parents that just want to be there to help the teachers. That was a really great part of my last school. And give me the rest of it, Gary. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess that was the thing that you really answered the question. I was just trying to figure out, and I guess if I would summarize what I heard you say is be involved. Certainly
much
some parents can't, but if they can volunteer a day here or there, be involved in whatever little fundraiser and things the kids are doing. I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, I can tell you that I cannot think of a single teacher from my last building who didn't have parents who would come in and help. Kindergarten teachers would line parents up each day to help in the morning or something like that. They would get those parents to listen to students read or work through words that they were learning or breaking down words into syllables, that type of thing, just in kindergarten alone. So it's a good resource. And if you have people that really are doing it for the right reason, not just wanting to keep an eye on their own child. So I never let that happen. So if you want to volunteer, you can't volunteer in your child's class.
Oh, okay. That's interesting because often I've seen that happen in our school. You pointed out something else with some of the change and how parents are involved, and this just came to my mind. Kids my age that played, like, say, baseball, and I'm in a little bit more rural area, but I hear it even in others. They would ride their bikes to baseball practice and home. They'd ride to the games and back, and it was more common than not that a lot of the parents wouldn't show up because they were working or whatever happened, they just couldn't play. So when my kids are in school, I'm always like, why is this parent not showing up? Why are they not putting effort in to be involved in their kid's life? And then somebody one day goes, you remember though, years ago, parents didn't come to all these sporting activities the way they do. And so there has been that shift where I think parents are much more involved than what they were at one time.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. I see it. The kids that I had in elementary school, they're either out of high school and have families of their own, and a lot of them are still in high school, and I'll go to the baseball games and the basketball games and the football games just to watch them and keep in touch. The community, this last community is very high parent involvement, and they're there for everything. That's not common for everybody, but it was
right.
here.
Yeah. Right. So let's kind of move to technology. I know, over the years, it has just changed the landscape of the educational system. Can you talk about that a little bit? Positives, negatives you've seen, the impact of COVID on that?
It's changed so much. And I think it's a great thing. I know people fear, or there are some people that fear that letting technology do the work, but that's not what I'd seen. It is a great resource for students. We've the goggles that they use now. They've changed names since back when I was there. Those experiences, we had teachers had lessons where we had a set of them, like 30 of them. And they would do a visit to the zoo that way, or they would do this whole butterfly lesson where the kids would really experience without having to. They go to the zoo anyhow, but without.
Are you talking about like the virtual reality?
Virtual reality goggles,
okay.
Yeah. I can't remember what the names of the new ones are that they have out, those Apple ones. But yeah. But
So
go ahead, Gary. Prompt me.
no, you finish technology.
I was going to say, but the technology has really played a big part. Uh, I think it's a good thing that schools, those who can, and I think almost all of them do now, because we have distance learning that happens on snow days, and that's certainly what we had when COVID came through. That students have access to iPads and laptops. It's a good thing. It requires monitoring, though. The school district does a great job of, on their end, of making sure that nothing leaks through that shouldn't be leaking through. So many, I don't know, so many little catches that they have there, and so it's really impossible to let the inappropriate stuff go on. But when those go home, and if parents aren't attentive to it, the kids, even though we have walls to stop that stuff, those kids are smart. They figure out some workarounds that I've not the age I had, but the older kids.
Right.
Separately, I'm Gage.
And I'm Bontrager.
Together, we are Gage Bontrager Consulting.
We work on changing your mindset,
Developing leaders,
building systems and processes,
helping you grow personally and professionally
to achieve the success that you want personally and professionally.
however you choose to define success for you.
Reach out to us and follow us on social media or look us up on the website, and that will put you on a path to achieve what is missing in your life.
Thanks for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.
You know, it's interesting that you bring this up with them having tablets and things to take home and iPads. And that kind of started when my kids were in school and it was new. And, you know, there's clearly concern, you know, you're always like, it's something new. How's this going to work? You're right. It has developed into, you know, clearly from Oregon Trail to now, you know, it's totally different. It's all online learning and those types of things. But really a lot of what we do is so much more efficient and effective because of it. And it's just the technology in which we're in. So there was a lot of evolution with that, but it does come back to parental involvement.
Yes, it does. I would say that in the schools, in the classrooms, smart boards are heaven blessed. The old chalkboards haven't existed for many, many years now, right. And you can bring anything up on those smart boards, making it interactive. You know, the most important thing for the students at that age is to get them involved, to get them interested. And I think that quite often that interactive experience is what does that.
I'm going to ask you a question, because we're in Iowa and you're in Indiana. And in Iowa, we have, and especially the district that my kids went to is very active. I think it's one of the largest with a homeschool program. But it's a lot more built around homeschool programs here. And then they will have like an old elementary where you can come in and do things. They'll have certain classes that you can take and the teachers will teach it virtually and some things like that. But I've learned through, even on some of these podcasts with some of our guests and some of our friends in Indiana, that you guys have literally a virtual school.
Yes.
So
Indiana
it's a little bit different. Yeah. So it's a little bit different. So do you guys have homeschool as well? Or is it primarily they use this virtual school as a similar method to, and it's just called something a little bit different?
They use the virtual school. It's set up through the state. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And what's your thoughts on that? Has that been effective? And if so, why?
My feeling is it's only effective as the people who are controlling it. And I don't mean the state. I mean the parents are
right.
The parent needs to be home for something like that, or supervising in some way as the child is working through things. That virtual school They have a lot of people who assist, so you can contact them and you can ask questions or say, hey, I have problems with this, that, I fail to be understanding, whatever. And um, it's just one more way, and it works for some kids, and it wouldn't work for others.
Right.
My only qualm about virtual school is interaction with other kids.
Right.
That's the one thing that I hope that the parents find ways to get those kids in with others, and have activities and do things together that way, because that really is a big deal.
I would agree with you. And that was probably the reason I sent my kids to a school, but I'm a very social person and I felt that interaction's important. One thing that I see happening in our area, though, then these kids will come in and do a lot of sports. And a lot of times it's like, oh, he's not at this elementary, they're in this or middle school, or he's in the homeschool program, but they will. The other thing that I think it offers opportunity to, that I've seen it be a positive, is if there's a child that's maybe struggling a little bit with just some, anxiety and things like that, and there's a little bullying going on or something. Sometimes if a parent, you're right, I think they need to be home, because your parent's really going to end up being a teacher here and make sure that everything's followed. But I think there's a way to kind of maybe reset and, build back. Because I've seen people do that for a year or two and then integrate their child back into the regular school system. So I think it's just another tool. And looking back at my education career, which we're not going to go into, but I spent some time in an appliance box in the middle of the room. And that did not help my education. In fact, it was very detriment, because and that's where it's a change. But I felt so humiliated, and now I was invisible to everybody else. So I didn't do any schoolwork, and I basically failed a grade out of that experience. However, that's when I look at these options and opportunities. I'm seeing these different states start to put together that it is beneficial, and parents can kind of choose off of a level of opportunity that maybe fits one child better than another.
Yes. Yeah.
So
we're starting to see in Iowa more schools looking at going to the 4-day school week. Do you have experience in that, and what's your thoughts?
We have not gotten to the 4-day school week. As teacher, educator, it'd probably be a fabulous thing, because but hopefully when those that are doing that 5th day for staff is in service training, those types of things, having family meetings, whether you go to the home or whether families can come to you and just say, okay, here, my son Tommy is having difficulty with this. Do you have any suggestions? And it doesn't have to be necessarily physically being there. It can be a conversation like we're doing, or it could be something over the phone. I'd like to know how well it works, because when I grew up and went to school, and it may have been the same for you too, school is a babysitter for many people in their minds. And I just find it difficult to go down to 4 days, because now you've got to find somebody to babysit while you're going to work on that Friday or that Monday.
Right. In fact, I see a lot of times there's before and after school programs, so parents can, depending on their job, utilize one of those depending on their hours that they work. But what do you think? Does that answer the question?
I think there's just a lot to contemplate when you're thinking about going to a 4-day.
I just feel like it messes with
And Brad brought up a really good point there. You plan on your kid being in school the 5 days a week. Granted, they get a day off for holidays, for conferences, this and that. You plan on those. And I suppose just like everything else in life, all these other changes, it's just an adjustment, something to get used to. But I guess I don't know how it affects it's got to affect the length of the school day. And I don't know what role that would play on the kids too.
Yeah.
The other
in there longer.
Go ahead.
Okay, it does. You have to lengthen that day. The states have requirements for how many hours during a school year. They're different.
Yeah.
They are different. I can't remember who it is. It's South Dakota, possibly. I read it, or I knew about it a long time ago, and it doesn't dawn on me as well. But there's one school, one state that has schools maybe 136 days out of the year. We're a mandatory 180 in Indiana. I don't know what it is in Iowa.
I think we're right around that. We're very close to the same. I think you guys are maybe a week or so ahead of us, one way or the other, but very similar. The thing I think I look at, and we're just creatures of habit, and there's a lot of stability in a child when routines are the same and they know what to expect. And I feel like it's, at least you have a 5-day, then you got your 2-day. It's easier. Parents got to move around on schedules. I would probably say it's more difficult, but
I don't know all of the reasoning for the 4-day. I do know that in all of the discussions I'd had over the years, it was money. It was, you didn't have to have cafeteria service. Although you'd end up, for those kids that needed food, you'd still pack all these lunches the night before, and so that you'd have a time for parents to come. And we did a lot of this with COVID going on, packing hundreds and hundreds of lunches, and then the parents would come and pick up the food and take it home with them. But fewer people are required for that. Another one would be bus drivers. Teachers would still be working, I would think, on those Fridays, those student off days. But so I'm not quite sure what the rest of the money savings would be other than support staff, like cafeteria and buses.
Right. So technology over the years has changed the landscape of everything. Social media clearly has changed a tremendous amount. One thing that I think parents suffer with sometimes is kids get bullied in school, and it can happen about anywhere. And some of that is, there's so many factors that why does that happen? Why are they picking on one kid? But social media clearly has changed all of that. I'm going to guess in your day, if you had a disagreement with somebody and you showed up for baseball practice, at some point, somebody was either going to say something or throw a punch, but it was going to end. It was going to get worked out, and you were going to learn
how it is or was.
And today, we now, and that's why even with my kids, when they needed something, I always said, if I call you, you can text me, but if I call you back, you'd better answer the phone. Because as a parent, I can still hear the stress level in their voice. I can tell, are you okay? You're not asking me, Jimmy's asking that for me to ride the bus home to his house, and you maybe don't want to go, but you can't tell him no. I said, if I call you, depending on what you text me, you answer the phone because I can hear in the voice. I'd even give them a sign, like, do a little whistle or something. If, a cue that I know that because they're standing there, you want an answer to get out of this deal. And so that's kind of where I see a lot of it, because now they see somebody did something or is wearing something and they can attack immediately, not understanding any of the circumstances.
Sure. I want to go back to the transportation piece first.
Okay.
Yeah. That if schools are doing it right, and I think I did it right, kids couldn't just go to another family's. Jimmy can't ask, hey, you want to come over to my house the day up?
Right.
There needs to be a note. And if you want a child to go to another child's home, you have to do it. The buses will not transport.
Okay.
Bus only transports the kids that are normally dropped off.
Yeah.
So there are some, catches to it all.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how about the social media side where these kids start sitting in class and sending each other, negative and nasty things? And
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of filters on all of that. The students do have their own personal ID, but getting into an email site or that's not easy at all.
Okay.
Everything's controlled through the tech department on what's allowed onto and going through a child's laptop or tablet.
So the phones, though, they could still do whatever they do on the phones, and that you cannot control. And that's really comes back. What I'm hearing you saying from an administrator's point of view, that's going to come back to parents in large. You protect what you can protect, and then you get caught in the fallout.
Right.
As necessary.
No, you're right. As they get older, the bullying just tends to really increase. I've seen kids middle school age, 5th, 6th grade and up, really be distraught to the point where they don't want to come to school. You cannot even drag them in.
Right.
And I think that's a conversation with the school and with the adults, with the parents, on what can we do. And a lot of the times it will be a difficult fix because, in all honesty, they want the school to handle it.
Right.
So-and-so's being mean to my child, being a bully to my child. Well, you can handle it to a point, but there has to be a time when the parent has to have enough courage and, I'll say, class to address it with that other child's parent in a way that's not confrontational.
Right. And it's a good lesson for kids to learn. Sometimes you need to walk away, don't escalate, don't respond.
Right.
It's something we
and
often want to.
Kids are comfortable in an elementary setting. They're fairly comfortable of going to an adult and saying, hey, this is what's happening. They're not to that point where they're too worried about it happening, even if you open your mouth.
So one thing that has drastically changed over the years, over the course of when you started to where we're at now, is school shootings. Yeah. This isn't something that we ever could have imagined happening. And now there's trainings on it, on what to do. The kids, how often do they do that? Is that
we ran drills 6 times a year. And then intermittent with that, we ran the fire drills and the tornado drill or two. The training happens regularly with the teachers as well. We have central office people who come in and do training or did training. They're physically, the buildings have changed. Buildings, those older buildings have been restructured. So the only way that you can get into that building is you get buzzed in, and the only way you can get into the office is if you get buzzed in. It's locked down. And,
we've seen that too. It really is a mental health issue, I guess I would say. And I don't know what your thoughts were when you put that question in there, Heather, but
I didn't. I just sprung that one on him.
Well, I understand, but I'm looking at our questions, and I'm just saying the mental health aspect, you've seen some change over the years with that. If there was any advice you'd give to a parent with a child, or even for themselves personally, if they're listening to this, because I believe mental health, we've had guests on here, Heather, and I don't remember the statistics. They say, 1 out of 4 is diagnosed with mental health, and 2 out of, or 50% of the remaining have it.
I was going to say we all have mental health.
Yeah, and some people argue that we all have some type of negative, mental health issues to deal with. My question, though, simply is, how has that changed? What do you recommend people to do if they recognize they're struggling in certain areas, feeling depressed, don't want to leave the house, things like that?
I think healthcare, mental health care is an important issue. We have a counselor. I had a counselor in the building, and that counselor did groups, small groups, individual meetings with students, would do self-esteem types of things where you'd find an older child, maybe a year or two older, who would match up and become the buddy or big brother, big sister type of thing. And
Love
the
those.
kids would constantly, the older one would go out of their way, raise their hand, tell their teacher, I need to go ask Carolyn down in kindergarten, I'm supposed to be her big sister, and I need to go ask her how her day was. Is that okay? Those types of things are happening in a building as well.
Right. So it's that interaction and communication and personal connection. And I think of all the technology, I guess, and we're going to wrap up here in a little bit, of all the technology that we talk about. And, some people panic, just like my dad didn't trust a calculator because it was an electronic device and he couldn't understand how it could be accurate. So he would use one, but then always check it. And it's no different that technology has changed, but the piece we can never take away is human connection and interaction. And I think if we look at what we see as we interview people, when it comes to whether it be mental health, bullying, whatever it is, that human connection is still very, very important in relationships and having people in a healthy space, not feeling isolated.
Right.
I guess as you look back over the years, the only thing that we don't have in here, and I'd like to ask you about, private schools in some areas have become very popular. And I know in some states they're starting to funnel tax dollars now, and it'll follow the child instead. What's some of your thoughts on that? Again, I know of people where they've had issues in one school. I've seen it where they went to a private school. I've seen kids in private schools come to a public school. But the parents were involved in their life and trying to make sure they made the best decision for that individual kid. And what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, in Indiana, we do have that, and it's fairly prevalent in Indiana. My thoughts are, find some place where you're comfortable. Find some place where you can where you can be happy, and find a place where you're going to learn. I think more than anything else, it's about making the connections, whether it's the kids making those connections or teachers making it with the kids. I'm mixed about that whole school situation, but I would encourage, certainly. I went to a parochial school,
right?
And I was fine, I think.
Yeah.
But I really, just any way to get the children comfortable in their setting and feel good about themselves. We spend a lot of time talking about the education end of this, and it's important to read and it's important to do math. And some things have fallen off the table since when we were kids. Social studies types of things have really kind of dropped off the face of the earth. But what's most important is, I would say, self-esteem or building esteem for kids. You want to do better. You want to be more successful if you have a great self-esteem.
You make a really good point about making sure it's a good fit, a good learning environment for the kid, because as parents, this is your school district, this is what you go to, and you stay there even though the kid might be struggling. It's going to take a lot more to pull that kid out and put them somewhere else, because our mindset is more focused on, this is your school, you're learning. Whereas if it's a job and it's not a good fit, we're going to find another one. But yeah, there's a large holdup of moving kids to find the good fit, because, a lot of times you don't want to move kids around either. It's difficult on them.
I find, go ahead.
I was just going to say that before a parent makes that move, make sure that they've had some conversations with staff in the school, because maybe their viewpoint isn't exactly as accurate, or certainly not the same as the viewpoint that a teacher might have, or principal or guidance counselor. They don't see what the child's coming home saying. That's a big one. Gosh, he's really popular. He's always called to be somebody wants to always sit next to that person at a table or whatever it might be, and the parents misled to believe something.
And I went to a parochial school growing up, so it was important for my children to go to a public school where I felt there were more programs and possibilities and opportunities for them. What I've probably learned out of the whole experience is exactly what you said, is each one was different, and so each experience was different. The challenge I lay out there for private or parochial schools, and I'm not sure there's a method to the madness and it'll ever change, but if those parents and communities would invest into their local public school systems the way they invest into those, I think you would raise the education system in that community all across the board. And that has always been my argument. I'm not against any parent that chooses to do that. But what happens is I see some parents not sure how to maybe get involved in a public school system, so they go to a smaller school because they feel like they can. And yet when I go in and see how small the classes are and the concern of teachers and how they interacted with us, I still challenge people to consider that idea. And it's maybe a crazy one, but I feel like a rising tide will raise all ships.
Right.
It's just community.
And that's it. You build that community from the inside with the school so that the kids are the ones that are taking it to their parents to make that community something past the four walls of a school.
Right. Well, Brad, I want to thank you for joining us on Mindset Growth Podcast. I really enjoyed our visit. This is something a little bit different than what we've done in the past, but a lot of people dial into us. And, a lot of times we interview business owners and things like that, but we come back to education, even in business. And a lot of business owners we work with, you've probably heard of it. A lot of times it seems like C students are small business owners and entrepreneurial minded. And then you've got, the A students that are the CPAs and attorneys and kind of some things like that. But I just appreciate you joining us for this conversation. I hope it sparks some interest or some challenges some folks to maybe get more involved in their kids' education and make a difference there. I believe it's the involvement of the parents still that's going to make all the difference in the end.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us. Heather, what's a takeaway or two that you had?
Well, just like you said, it is a challenge sometimes, as busy as our lives are, to make sure that as parents we are involved in their education. And they have so many apps out now where each school generally has one where you can log in and you can see the progress, you can see the grades, you can see if they are missing assignments. And I'm guilty of not checking that nearly as often enough, because I'm lucky enough that my kids are pretty good students. But
and just a real quick note and we'll wrap up. That's one nice thing that technology has brought. My youngest son was sliding all his homework under the freezer, and it took me a year to figure out one day when one page stuck out, and he was still passing the class. I didn't understand it, but thank you, Brad. Thank you. All of our audience for tuning into Mindset Growth Podcast. We appreciate you and look forward to the next episode.